How's everyone doing? Did you guys survive the blizzard? All right. All right. So, past month it's been fast and furious with with Todd assembling the coaching staff and getting prepared for Indianapolis. It's really been a great past couple weeks. Todd's been a really great partner. I'm really excited about the group of coaches that he's put together that we're putting the finishing touches on. And, coming back down to glorious Indianapolis, where we get to have our first look, so to speak, of this upcoming draft class. We expect it to be a productive week with, meeting a number of the young men and players that we're going to have interest in come April, as well as have good conversations with some of our own guys and impending free agents. So a lot of business to do. Feel really good about where we're headed. And with that, I'll open it up for questions. Chris, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that youth equals, lack of performance. I think two of the three youngest teams this past year were Philadelphia and Green Bay. I think, we're a little bit unique in the NFL where it's not like, baseball where a team, a prospect has to be in the farm system for 7 years before they hit the big league level. There is certainly an adjustment period for young players, but we want to have high expectations for guys that come into our program to be role players, to ascend into starters, and I think we saw that this past year with this past draft class.
What is your understanding of the Tonio's future?
Tony, Joel's still working through that. And, at this point in his career, at this point in his life, he deserves the time and space to do that, stay in regular communications, and we'll work through that at the appropriate time.
We'll get back to Browns general manager Andrew Berry in just a second, but I want to remind everybody to hit that subscribe button. If you want exclusive NFL Combine coverage all week, we will have it here for you on the Browns Report channel. By the way, free daily videos all offseason long. A lot of important dates coming up for the Browns and all of the NFL here in the offseason. Free agency is right around the corner. The NFL draft coming up in April. I'll have you covered with what the Browns need to do, who they're looking at, who they bring in, because this roster has some obvious holes that Cleveland is going to fill this offseason. I'll have you covered, and I'm glad that we make this an interactive and informative show. I want to hear your guys' opinions in the comments section. I'll give you Browns news right as it happens. It is totally free, so join the family of Browns fans here, and I'll have you covered with the Combine all week long. Let's get back to Barry's interview.
Absolutely.
You said you had
you know what? Right now it's February 24th. Thank you. I appreciate it, Scott. So, we don't have to make that decision anytime soon. I think any player that we have in that room, we would expect to compete to earn a role. Those two would be no different.
You said you had ample room for free agency. How aggressive do you expect to be, especially compared to last year?
No, great question. So, Scott, I would anticipate that there's at least the chance that we would be a little bit more aggressive more aggressive than last year. But it'll be targeted and opportunistic. I think, realistically, we may be one more offseason away from being like hyper aggressive in that window. But if there's something that fits us, fits our roster, fits our timeline, then it's certainly a swing we'll take.
Is that balancing what you said? Is that like balancing what you said a couple of weeks ago, that with where you are with the life cycle of the roster, you're not in a position to add 30-year-old free agents?
Yeah, it is, Ashley, because I think, we're still, building out this new core. I think also, roster spots, they're commodities. And I think one of the things that we want to continue to lean into that we did last year is having roster spots open for young players to contribute and grow and play, as opposed to necessarily maybe blocking them for, a short-term solution, based on where our team is currently.
Coach Monken talked about fitting his scheme to talent with an offensive line in flux. How does that affect you in the front office? You have power players, movement players, those kind of things. How does that work for you?
Well, I'd say I think you could look, you could look no further than Baltimore. Like if you go, from left to right on their O-line. You had Ronnie Stanley, obviously he had been one of the better left tackles in the game. At left guard, you had a combination between Andrew Voorhees, who was more of a strength-related player, and Emory Jones, who was a rookie. Tyler Lindenbaum, who was an athletic-style center. Daniel Falele, who was, like human orca big, really big power player, that type of thing. And then Roger Rosengarten, who was, more of your athletic-style player. So, I don't think that there's necessarily like just a universal commonality, but they have to have enough of everything to be scheme versatile.
Andrew, when your needs are, or your goals and needs are so vast on one side as offense, just how do you approach the draft in terms of taking best player available versus trying to also address that?
I think you've heard me say over the years that the draft, it's really for like highest sustainable impact, and that's not to say that need or positional value doesn't have some role in that. But at the same time, it's not like you're just going to match your picks to the best of whatever. I mean, I think about a year ago at this time, I wouldn't have guessed that the draft would have played out positionally the way that it did in 2025. And you have to be flexible, you have to be adaptable in terms of where the player pool and where the talent pool is. I think the good thing about this coaching staff, really in all three phases, is they are very adaptable to using your best player. So you have to be open to the fact that it may not look exactly the way that you'd envision it or that you'd hope that it would look coming out of it.
What would Shedeur show these next couple of months to prove to you that he can be your starter from day one, 26 or
Yeah, I'd say this, Mary Kay. So I'd say number one, probably a better question for Todd, tomorrow when he hits the podium. I think the biggest thing that we want to see from Shedeur is just continued growth. I think he grew a lot from start 1 to start 7. I think certainly playing more efficiently, not putting the ball in harm's way as much would be important. While maintaining the ability to produce out of structure and generate explosive plays. You're not going to see all of that in the upcoming months because we're not on the field. So the biggest thing that he can do is learn the new offense, get in with the coaching staff once our offseason program starts, continue to work on his body physically, and then make strides when we actually get on the grass.
How many rookies starting up?
Let me go here, and then I'll go to you. Okay.
How many rookies in the starting offensive line are too many?
I don't think there's a fixed number there.
Are we comfortable with 3 rookies?
If they're the right ones. If you're telling me I get Tristan Wirfs, Penny Sewell, and Tyler Linderbaum, yeah, sure, I'll take it. Yeah, those guys as rookies, yeah, they'll sign me up. I don't see a problem with that. Yeah, I think Grant is. I mentioned after our search process, I think the coaching community in general, the NFL coaching community in general, is in really good shape. I think there are a number of young and maybe not well-known coaches that are going to be really, really, really successful. When they get their opportunities. Grant was super smart. Very detailed. He had come up under really good mentors. Very adaptable. He's obviously done a nice job in Jacksonville, and I'd imagine he'll continue to do so.
Don't you see a problem with drafting a quarterback?
It's the most important position. We wouldn't talk about it any differently if we were drafting an O lineman or a D lineman or something along those lines. I don't think that you can invest in it enough.
Given that, is there any truck or hesitation that you took 2 last year and adding another one this year to 3, 2 years or under guys in a couple years?
I wouldn't put any restraint on it.
How is DeJuan Jones progressing from his injury, and do you expect him to be a big factor while you rebuild this offensive line?
Yeah, he's progressing well. He's been in there every day. He's done a really nice job, with his rehab. He's right on track, and I would expect him to factor in.
What about Whippler?
Oh, ditto there. Yeah.
Did he have surgery?
Tony, I don't want to misspeak on that. I can't remember at this current moment, but he'll be ready to go. All right, let me go Ashley, then I'll go Jory, Okay.
David and Joe posted a goodbye on Instagram. I guess just what do you think about the future of those tight ends and with Harold in his rookie year? How much does that affect some of the guys' future decisions for that position?
It would be disingenuous to say it doesn't factor in. We're very pleased with Harold, and we do view him as the future of that position. What he did as a rookie player. as a 21-year-old was incredible. And I think one of the most difficult things to do as an organization, and certainly as a general manager, is when you realize there's a possibility that a professional relationship has run its course with a long tenured player who has done a lot for the organization, and you develop a personal relationship with. If David's not back, he'll be a Brown for life, and I'm sure that whenever he does hang him up, he'll be a dog pound captain at the beginning of the games, and I'm sure he'll smash the guitar with his shirt off. So we're excited to bring him back. Enjoy. Joy, that's a fantastic question. I'm actually really glad you asked it. It's funny because before I came down here, I was actually going back and looking through all my notes with Rondale through the draft process, and this is a young man who was incredibly well regarded. With everyone who had been around him, had an incredibly bright future. And I was just thinking that, what people don't realize is how hard the rehab process is on professional athletes, especially when you have major injuries. And it's not just the grueling process of getting healthy, but it's the isolation that comes with it a lot of times. And for people in their early 20s or their mid 20s, where it may be the first time that they've experienced a professional setback, or they don't have maybe the communal aspect that normally comes with college, and it's frustrating. I do think that as a league that we can do a better job, resourcing clubs to make sure that we have that touch point. It's something that we're really proactive with and we're really sensitive to. We try to make sure that as many of our guys as possible can rehab locally or be on site so they can have that team affiliation. We encourage our guys to stay in meetings, and we also have scheduled regular check-ins with team psychiatrists and team psychologists, because we do know that is a real factor. But it's an incredible tragedy, and I do think it's something that we could be a lot more aware of.
Andrew, this is your 7th offseason. Is there something that has changed significantly from year 1 to now that you would speak to?
I'd say two things. No pandemic. But probably the bigger thing is just growing in patience. And my wife, my kids, my staff, Monk would probably tell you that will definitely tell you I'm not a patient person. But I think I'm growing with that with each year of experience. Let me go here, and then I'll come back to you, Tony. Okay.
There was an interesting report during the hiring about how you were having candidates who wrote essays, or you kind of go about it in a different way. Can you tell us a little bit more about that process, and what writing essays, site testing, and a little bit more about what you had your head coach candidates go through?
Yeah, Tom created a little brush fire, didn't he? So I think, unfortunately, maybe some of that stuff was maybe a little bit mischaracterized and overblown. But, look, the head coaching position is the most important position in the organization, or head coach and quarterback are. It's a position where you're going to sink significant resources. It's going to have a huge impact. It's really like you're hiring a CEO for any other company. The other thing is the hiring rules for the NFL are a lot more unique than they are probably in any other industry. So, number one, we want to know everything that we can about candidates, and that includes, reference work. That includes, obviously, the interview process, their work history, behavioral assessment, cognitive assessment. It's that important. But the other piece of it is, I think, what maybe many people don't realize is the first 2 weeks of the process, you only get 3 hours on a Zoom, right? And that's very limited time for the topics that you have to cover. And one of the things that we did was we gave, some of the candidates maybe 5 prompts, so to speak, that we would talk about, during that virtual session. But it's better to get them ahead of time than necessarily get it on the spot, and then you have to answer something that's a little bit more deep and involved. So it was something that was really fruitful for us. We were really pleased with the interaction we had with the candidates, and like I forgot who I told her earlier, the coaching candidate pool in the NFL, it's in really good hands.
So last year, you devoted a lot of energy to quarterback scouting job. You, the owner, coach, went to a lot of programs. Will you do that this year?
TBD, Tony. It's we're in maybe a little bit of a different position, a little bit of a different class. We're not picking 2, although we are picking 6. I think the quarterback class is different, than it was in terms of, when guys may go off the board. But needless to say, we will devote a lot of time to the passers like we do every year.
When you talk about rebuilding the offensive line, would you think you would lean more young versus a veteran as far as tackle spots?
Not necessarily, Scott. I guess thinking about the offensive line, I actually think what Chicago and what Ryan Poles did last year is a really nice model. If you think about it, they did a combination of internal development, veteran additions, and draft, right? You had Darnell Wright, who he really came into his own at right tackle this past year. They traded for Joe Thuney. They traded for Jonah Jackson. They signed Dahlman in free agency, and they drafted Ozzie Dean Trapilo in the second round. So it's a nice mixture of like youth and experience, and I think that, we would look to take a similar approach if the player markets line up for us.
A couple more.
It gives you the feeling that Deshaun Watson, even though he really hasn't played a full season since 2020, actually has a legitimate chance to come in the starting job.
I think any player on our roster we would want to compete. Like, we believe in competition at every spot. That's no different than quarterback. Deshaun's been working really hard. He's been working his tail off, and like I said, we're excited to get going in April with all of our players across the roster because competition is something that we really believe in. I didn't hear what you said after slot wide receiver position.
What are some of the skills you're looking for?
I think it's simple. Like, hey, get open, catch the ball, make plays with the ball in your hands. Like, don't really necessarily care how a guy does it, but look, we all want receivers who can get open, catch it, and create after they have it in their hands.
Good.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.